Okay, tonight is Alma chapter 2.
And it came to pass in the commencement of the 5th year of their reign, there began to be a contention among the people. For a certain man, being called Amaleki, he being a very cunning man, yea, a wise man as to the wisdom of the world, he being after the order of the man that slew Gideon by the sword, who was executed according to the law. Now this Amaleki had by his cunning drawn away much people after him, even so much that they began to be very powerful, and they began to endeavor to establish Amaleki to be a king over the people. Now this was alarming to the people of the church, and also to all those who had not been drawn away after the persuasions of Amaleki, for they knew that according to their law, that such things must be established by the voice of the people. Therefore, if it were possible that Amaleki should gain the voice of the people, he, being a wicked man, would deprive them of their rights and privileges of the church, for it was his intent to destroy the church of God.
This chapter begins in the 5th year, okay, of the reign of the judges. And so let's say 4 years have passed since they began this, and so now you have a different kind of a challenge coming here. Okay, we have a man who's trying to be king. Right? And notice that it says here in the first verse, it says this man Amaleki, it says, was a very cunning man, a wise man to the wisdom of the world. There are plenty of people who you'll know, and who are they're smart people. They know how to get things done, right? And they can accomplish much in the world, right? And so and some good things as well as things for themselves. All right, but it may have nothing to do with what God wants, as we've said, right? That if, so just because you're intelligent, just because you know how the system works, doesn't make you a person of God, obviously, right? But it's the wisdom of God that would makes a difference. So here it says this man was a wise man based on the wisdom of the world, and so therefore he was able to get what he wanted, and what he wanted in this case was power. So here he's got people who are willing to follow him, and to the point where they say, hey, let's make him the king, right? And here we just got rid of the king system 4 years ago, and let's bring it back again, right? Because now we have somebody who we want to support to be king, right? So that's what he says. By his cunning, he's able to draw away much people after him, so much that they want him to be their king. Now, what's the reaction of the rest of the people? It was alarming to the people of the church, right, in verse 3, right? So, also they were, I guess, we're quick to point out that according to the law, I mean, any kind of a change of especially this magnitude, required a vote, right? Because that was the system they put in place now. So that being that there was no more king, so that the king couldn't just come down and say, okay, this is the way it is because I said so. Right? They put in like a democracy, a system of democracy, where you had a vote and the majority rules. So if you remember, a couple chapters ago, they had said that that typically, I guess in the feeling of the people here, typically the majority would pick the right way, right? What was their feeling? But then God said, what happens if the majority is not going to pick the right way? That would be the time that God would put the destruction in motion, right? If the majority was going to start picking the wrong thing, right? That's when we related it to today, right? Where it's kind of gone that way, where the majority is not, in general, in favor of things of God. All right. So anyway, they had to have a vote here, and so they were quick to point that out. But yet they were still afraid that this was a cunning man, and I'm sure he had a lot of charisma and so forth, where a lot of people would probably like him and want to support him. Yeah, okay, yeah. If we had him as the king, then it would be good to have a king, kind of thing. So they were afraid. They were afraid that they was going to have a majority that would say, yeah, we want to go back to the king system and make this guy the king, right? So that's what they were worried about, but yet they knew him, that he was. Especially people of the church knew this was a wicked man, as you just said. So if he becomes the king, that's the end of the church then, right? That'll be his first thing. Get rid of the church, right? Because he could just say that then if he's the king. So yeah, they were pretty nervous.
And it came to pass that the people assembled themselves together throughout all the land, every man according to his mind, whether it were for or against Amaleki, in separate bodies, having much dispute and wonderful contentions one with another. And thus they did assemble themselves together to cast in their voices concerning the matter, and they were laid before the judges. And it came to pass that the voice of the people came against Amaleki, that he was not made king over the people.
So they had a vote, and what happened? He lost. Okay, he lost. See, he was running against nobody. And he lost. And he came in second, yeah.
Well, the voice of the people.
The voice of the people, all right, it was good, okay? That's right, the voice of the people spoke and said, this is what we want, we don't want a king, right? So therefore he was not made king over the people because the vote went that way.
Now this did cause much joy in the hearts of those who were against him, but Amaleki did stir up those who were in his favor to anger against those who were not in his favor. And it came to pass that they gathered themselves together and did consecrate Amaleki to be their king. Now when Amaleki was made king over them, he commanded them that they should take up arms against their brethren, and this he did that he might subject them to him.
Talk about being a sore loser, right? So those who were in favor of that said, well, we don't care what the vote was, right? We still want this guy to be our king. So within themselves, they formed their own subgroup, if you will, and said, okay, now we're our own group, and this guy's our king, right? So they named him king of their own group. And the first order of business after making him king was, let's go have a war with the rest of the people here. All right, so now that we've kind of separated ourselves from them, so now they're our enemies, so now we're going to go have a war with them and presumably wipe them out, and then we can have what we wanted in the first place.
Now the people of Amaleki were distinguished by the name of Amaleki, being called Amalekites, and the remainder were called Nephites, or the people of God. Therefore the people of the Nephites were aware of the intent of the Amalekites, and therefore they did prepare to meet them. Yea, they did arm themselves with swords, and with scimitars, and with bows, and with arrows, and with stones, and with slings, and with all manner of weapons of war of every kind. And thus they were prepared to meet the Amalekites at the time of their coming, and they were appointed captains, and higher captains, and chief captains, according to their numbers.
In addition to forming their own group, they even changed the name. Okay, so because the whole kingdom was known as the Nephites, since they were all Nephites. Right, so they were all known as Nephites up to this point, but now they're actually going to secede from that and say, we're not part of that group anymore. Now we're Amalekites, right? So we're no more Nephites. So now you have those who were the Amalekites, and everybody else was the Nephites. Okay, 12 and 13 says the Nephites were aware of the intent of the Amalekites, right? And now it says they prepare themselves for battle, right? You see all the weapons that they were going to get, and the captains and chief captains and high captains and whatever, right? So they organize themselves to go to war here against those who had been their brethren, those who were living in the same town and used to be under King Mosiah, and everybody was in agreement, and they knew what was coming, right? That they knew that they were going to be attacked. So we better prepare ourselves rather than we just be wiped out because we're sitting here doing nothing, right? They prepare themselves for battle.
And it came to pass that Amaleki did arm his men with all manner of weapons of war of every kind, and he also appointed rulers and leaders over his people to lead them to war against their brethren. And it came to pass that the Amalekites came upon the hill Amnihu, which was east of the river Sidon, which ran by the land of Zarahemla, and there they began to make war with the Nephites. Now Alma being the chief judge and the governor of the people of Nephi, therefore he went up with his people, yea, with his captains and chief captains, yea, at the head of his armies, against the Amalekites to battle.
They're preparing to have their battle now, and so on the one hand, I would say it's, I don't know, maybe it felt a little funny to some of the people who are now called the Amalekites. I mean, here they're going to war against the Nephites. Well, they themselves are Nephites, right? So it would be like, say a group of people in the United States got together and made their own little kingdom, and now they were going to declare war against the United States, or fight against the Americans. Well, yesterday I was an American, now today I'm fighting the Americans, so that's kind of what they're doing here now. They're kind of fighting against really people who were their own people. So now, as they prepare to do this, for the Nephite army, who's at the forefront of the army? It says Alma was going to lead them into the battle, right? So, because it says that he was the chief judge and governor of the people, so as their leader, so it made sense that he would lead these people into the battle. Now, I don't know how much of a military guy he was, because he didn't really say when that was in his background, but yet as the leader, so he said, well, I need to be out front. God is going to protect us, and so we want to do what's right here and lead our people in this way basically to protect ourselves. I mean, it's not that they were trying to attack anybody, but they were being attacked, so they had to defend themselves.
And they began to slay the Amalekites upon the hill east of Sidon, And the Amalekites did contend with the Nephites with great strength, insomuch that many of the Nephites did fall before the Amalekites. Nevertheless, the Lord did strengthen the hand of the Nephites, that they slew the Amalekites with great slaughter, that they began to flee before them. And it came to pass that the Nephites did pursue the Amalekites all that day, and did slay them with much slaughter, insomuch that they were slain of the Amalekites 12,532 souls, and there were slain of the Nephites 6,562 souls.
You can see from the standpoint of keeping good records, I guess they went and counted all the bodies, right? And so certainly for their own people, I guess they would want to be informing the families of what had happened. So they even took down names. A lot of death, right, over this. And again, this is all Nephite people, so it's Nephite people killing Nephite people, right? But as you can see, whereas at the beginning, perhaps we'll call them the bad guys, all right, were winning. That at the beginning they were killing the Nephites, but what happens after that in verse 18? 18 says the Lord just strengthened the hand of the Nephites, right? And that's that's a key part, all right, because otherwise this is just who's a better captain or who's a better fighter, and so that's can be interesting to a point, right? But the idea of this is that the Lord strengthened the side that he was with, and so when the Lord is with you, then who can be against you? Okay, so then that's why that side then became the winning side on this particular day. Right now, still to have 6,000 of your people die is not a good thing. It says, hey, 12,000 of theirs died, so so saying they basically outfought them this particular day because the Lord strengthened them, and probably a lot of those 6,000 were killed at the beginning. So then after that, when they rallied, then they pretty much they slaughtered them, okay, because God was with them. And it's not that you revel and say, oh wow, we killed all those people, but rather that we successfully defended ourselves because God was with us. Because they didn't want to have a fight in the first place, but here this was all over this one guy who wanted to be a king.
And it came to pass that when Alma could pursue the Amalekites no longer, he caused that his people should pitch their tents in the valley of Gideon, the valley being called after that Gideon who was slain by the hand of Nehor with the sword. And in this valley the Nephites did pitch their tents for the night. And Alma sent spies to follow the remnant of the Amalekites, that he might know of their plans and their plots, whereby he might guard himself against them, that he might preserve his people from being destroyed. Now those whom he had sent out to watch the camp of the Amalekites were called Zeram and Amnor and Manti and Limher. These were they who went out with their men to watch the camp of the Amalekites.
The beginning of verse 20 is saying that they were pursuing the Amalekites, as an army, mainly because again these people came and wanted to kill us all. So while we're in this attitude of fighting, well, we may as well knock out as many as we can, because otherwise we're not going to be able to rest easy. Our people are not going to be able to live in peace if we're under this constant threat that somebody's going to come and try to kill us. So these are now the enemy, so now we need to wipe them out, right? So they pursued them for a while, but it says when they couldn't pursue them any longer, now they stopped to rest the army, and now is when they employ some spies. They said, well, you guys go ahead and keep an eye on them. We can't move all these thousands of men forward like this, but 4 of you can go check out what's happening, and you can keep up with their army and see what they're doing. So that was the idea. So they sent these 4 men ahead to check out the camp and see what was going on.
And it came to pass that on the morrow they returned into the camp of the Nephites in great haste, being greatly astonished, and struck with much fear, saying, Behold, we followed the camp of the Amalekites, and to our great astonishment, in the land of Minon, above the land of Zarahemla, in the course of the land of Nephi, we saw a numerous host of Lamanites, and behold, the Amalekites have joined them. And they are upon our brethren in that land, and they are fleeing before them with their flocks and their wives and their children towards our city. And except we make haste, they obtain possession of our city, and our fathers and our wives and our children be slain.
What the spies find out was probably as bad as what they could have found out. That here, this group that was a Nephite group, and it was kind of just a renegade Nephite group, well, now they're joining with the real enemy. Right? So now they've gone to, and they've paired up with the Lamanite people, and the two together are making their way back to the city where everybody lives. Right, and by our little map here, okay, so all the Nephite people live here in the land of Zarahemla, okay, and where they were for a while was over here in the land of Nephi, but so when they left from there, just the Lamanite people live over here now. So it's like this army made their way over here, right, joined the Lamanites, and now they're headed over this way. So while this other army is sitting out here somewhere chasing them, they say, uh-oh, they're headed this way now, so we're gonna have to head them off before they get back and kill our families and take over the city. That's the immediate threat now, right? So now it's gotten much worse because now the army is much larger and much more negative towards us, right? The Lamanite army won't kill us as soon as look at us. Okay, so they don't need a reason to come and fight the Nephites. Hey, good, another chance to fight the Nephites. We're up for that.
And it came to pass that the people of Nephi took their tents and departed out of the valley of Gideon towards their city, which was the city of Zarahemla. And behold, as they were crossing the river Sidon, the Lamanites and the Amalekites, being as numerous almost, as it were, as the sands of the sea, came upon them to destroy them. Nevertheless, the Nephites, being strengthened by the hand of the Lord, having prayed mightily to him that he would deliver them out of the hands of their enemies, therefore the Lord did hear their cries, and did strengthen them, and the Lamanites and the Amalekites did fall before them.
So now we see how them knowing what was happening allowed them to thwart this attack. Right? It says that they made their way back towards their own city. Right? Zarahemla, knowing that's where they were headed. And so, of course, we don't necessarily know the geography intimately here, but it says as they were crossing the river Sidon is when they met up. So we've seen that name River Sidon a few times, so that was likely close to where they lived, close to Zarahemla, so that's where they met up, and then so they were able to go to the battle. Now, it says that how many men were in the Lamanite army here, the Lamanite/Amalekite army? It says in 27. It says, being as numerous almost as it were as the sands of the sea. Okay, so in other words, you can imagine they're looking and they're just men everywhere, right, ready to come at them in this battle. So it was a huge army, and now their army was already down 6,532 from the other battle, right? So now they had to fight this large army. But what had they done to prepare?
Prayed mightily.
Prayed mightily. Okay, see, like I said, remember that's the kind of story this is, right? That God is involved in this story. So it says in 28, it says, having prayed mightily to him that he would deliver them out of their hands, therefore the Lord heard their cries and strengthened them, and this huge army, it says, did fall before them. Okay, so they were able to take on this large army because they had prayed and God strengthened them.
And it came to pass that Alma fought with Amaleki with the sword, face to face, and they did contend mightily one with another. And it came to pass that Alma, being a man of God, being exercised with much faith, cried, saying, O Lord, have mercy, and spare my life, that I may be an instrument in thy hands to save and preserve this people. Now when Alma had said these words, he contended again with Amaleki, and he was strengthened, insomuch that he slew Amaleki with the sword.
Up until this point, you had, this army is fighting that army, and so forth. All right, well, now it's time for the leaders to get together. So as it says here, it came to pass that Alma fought with Amaleki with a sword face to face, one-on-one. All right, so this was the guy who wanted to be king, the guy who's really the cause of the whole problem. All right, so now it's time to settle this. So it says now they're going to fight one-on-one. And as I said before, I don't know that Alma was a military kind of guy, all right? But he was well armed with what? Being a man of God, right? Okay, right. So it says in 30, it says it came to pass that Alma, being a man of God, being exercised with much faith, right? So he, even in the middle of fighting, was able to talk to God. He says to spare my life, not just because I don't want to die, and not even so that my family doesn't lose their husband or father, but for a particular purpose. And it says there that I may be an instrument in your hands to save and preserve this people. Right? So just to, so extend my life so I can continue to be used by you to take care of your people. Right? So I mean, that's a very unselfish kind of a prayer. And so even as he said that, it says now, verse 31, it says, when he said these words, so it wasn't that, he just said it and then a while later happened. When he said these words, that he contended again with Amaleki and was strengthened as much that he killed him then, right? So he won this one-on-one battle, right? Because he prayed and said those words, and then God gave the strength to end this thing, right? And so, like I said earlier, it's not that you say, oh goody, the bad guy is dead, right? But it's, he was the instigator of the whole problem. So, God puts up with stuff to a degree, but then the time God moves and removes the problem. And so that's really what happened here. He used Alma as an instrument in his hands to put an end to this particular situation.
And he also contended with the king of the Lamanites, but the king of the Lamanites fled back from before Alma and sent his guards to contend with Alma. But Alma with his guards contended with the guards of the king of the Lamanites until he slew and drove them back. And thus he cleared the ground, or rather the bank, which was on the west of the river Sidon, throwing the bodies of the Lamanites who had been slain into the waters of Sidon, that thereby his people might have room to cross and contend with the Lamanites and the Amalekites on the west side of the river Sidon. And it came to pass that when they had all crossed the river Sidon, and the Lamanites and the Amalekites began to flee before them, notwithstanding they were so numerous that they could not be numbered.
Although I said that a minute ago that by killing Amalekite, that was to put an end to the whole thing. I mean, it wasn't quite the end because they had involved the whole Lamanite army now too. And so now it's the king of the Lamanites was leading the charge of these people. So Alma said, all right, let me have that king next. All right, and so he was ready to fight that king, but that king, I guess, wasn't quite so brave after he saw what happened to Amalekite. So he sent his guards instead. He says, hey, you guys, you go fight this battle for me, all right? And so as you can see, they were eventually in full retreat at this point, right? So they saw you can't fight against the power of God, right? So if they saw that and sensed that this was a man of God, and now in spite of being really outnumbered, this smaller army is winning this battle, and they can't be beaten, well then there's no sense continuing because we're going to lose. So that's the time to cut your losses and be on your way. And so that's what happened. So they were retreating, and there were so many bodies, they were throwing them in the river and so forth. So there was really a mass slaughter because God was in the matter.
And they fled before the Nephites towards the wilderness, which was west and north, away beyond the borders of the land. And the Nephites did pursue them with their might, and did slay them. Yea, they were met on every hand, and slain and driven, until they were scattered on the west and on the north, until they had reached the wilderness, which was called Hermounts. And it was that part of the wilderness which was infested by wild and ravenous beasts. And it came to pass that many died in the wilderness of their wounds, and were devoured by those beasts, and also the vultures of the air, and their bones have been found, and have been heaped up on the earth.
As this army was retreating, it says they were pursued, and many of them were killed. Now, why do you think that it goes into the detail of it was the part of the wilderness where it was infested by wild beasts, and the beasts came and ate them, and the vultures picked at them, and their bones were left around? I mean, that's kind of gross, really. So why do you think they're including that kind of detail? I mean, this is what happens to those who fight against the will of God, right? Those who fight against the people of God and would kill the people of God. This is the kind of ending that you would expect, as was said. And so this shows what can happen. Also, as I was reading it, if you think back some months and months now, like when we were reading some of the prophecies in Isaiah, or from Isaiah, that are in 2nd Nephi, some of them sounded something like this, right? It talks about, your bones will be picked apart by wild beasts, and so it was those kind of prophecies. And so I think it was just to show also, that this is what happens again to those who fight against the plan of God, right? And I think they started prophesying about these people in particular, but it does kind of line up with that, right? That was that was prophesied would happen to those who fight against God. So I think that's why they included it. So, but for all the reasons that we said, right? Also to show that this is what happens to the bad guys. This is how the end that they came to.